Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Power8 End of Support, what does it mean and what are my options? Before we bring on Steve Pitcher, we are going to go through just a couple of quick items and also give everyone enough time to get on. So slides and recordings, just so everyone knows, the slides and recordings will be available after the session. We will be emailing them to you over no later than tomorrow, so keep a lookout on your inbox and we'll be getting those to you shortly. And if you have any questions during the session, please put them right into the questions tab on the GoToWebinar panel. Steve will be answering all questions today at the end of the presentation. And just one more thing before we kick this off, want to let you know to save the date. We had such a great Power 10 live Q&A last month and so many questions that we're actually coming back with a part 2. So if you had a question that wasn't answered, we will be answering it in this session. And that's going to be on Wednesday, November 15th, 10 a.m. Eastern time here in the States and 3 p.m. Over in the UK. We'll have Pete Masiello, Steve Pitcher, and Lori LeBlanc back for the whole live Q&A. So with that, I would like to bring on Steve Pitcher. Steve?
Hey, Heather. How you doing?
Hey, good. How are you? All right, I'm going to kick this over to you. So take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm going to show my screen here. Welcome, everybody. Let's give me 1 second here.
Steve, we lost your audio.
There we go. Sorry, I just had to mute myself there. Excellent. All right, welcome everybody. This is Power8 End of Service. What's it mean? What's your options? You know, I kind of been talking about this for a little while here, and I put a post on LinkedIn, I don't know, a couple of months ago, I think, just before 7.3 went out of service. And you know, I did this presentation a little while ago, I think in the spring somewhere, maybe for us. So I've updated it now that 7.3 is gone end of service, because that changes things a little bit, especially if you're still running 7.3. So this will mostly be related to Power8, what your options are, the costs and the risks of staying where you are. But we're also going to talk a little bit about operating systems, because that does drive hardware upgrades a lot of the time. So it's gonna be a bit of a mix in this session. We're gonna talk about some price increases that are upcoming, and some are quite hefty. And we're gonna talk about some service extensions for both hardware and software, including the one for 7.2, which I was just made aware of this morning, which is going to be fun for anybody who's running 7.2 on, say, a Power8 or a Power7. You're in for the ride of your life in the spring of 2024. So 7.3 is bad. 7.2 is going to be ghastly. I think that's probably the best word I can think of. I don't use that term very often, but that's what it is. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about Power8. Now, it's really hard to believe this darn box is, you know, 8-9 years old. I remember putting in our Power8 at the time. I was a customer of what was iTech Solutions, and had Pete Masiello come up and put our Power8 machine in and our CBU box in, and you know, a couple of years later, I ended up leaving my company and joining iTech. But yeah, that's a while ago. That's 2014, almost a decade ago. End of marketing for that machine went out in 2018, coinciding with the announcement for Power9, the 41A models. So it's very long in the tooth. However, it was, if you look at how much of these IBM did sell, it was a highly successful machine. The S814 in particular, at the time, was the most often sold Power8 machine out there, and there's still a lot out there, which is why we're doing this webinar now. Some people can, I guess, afford to roll over their hardware every 2 Power iterations. So if you're going, you know, if you bought a Power6, you might be replacing with a Power8, then replacing with a Power10. Some are a little bit more, I suppose, aggressive where they'll probably get a 3-year lease. When that lease is up, they'll get some new iron in there. And they take advantage of, updated things like the Power9, the 41A came out, then 2 years later, the 41G came out. What's the difference? Well, you can do a heck of a lot more things on a 41G in terms of hardware for a Power9 with NVMe adapter sizes and things like that. So it made the move to a Power9 much more consumable, I suppose. So there are people I'm aware of that went from a Power9 41A to a Power9 41G just 2 to 3 years after they put the original 41A in. That's super aggressive. But for the most part, we find that people tend to skip a power iteration. A lot of people tend to do it every time there's a new power systems version that comes out as well. So they may get a Power 7, Power 8, Power 9, Power 10. But I do see a lot of people skipping, so if they get a Power 8, they're going to skip Power 9, they're going to go a Power 10. The operating system longevity, I suppose, or the supported life of an operating system version or versions on a piece of hardware can allow customers to do that quite successfully. So long story short, this is some old iron. This is some quite old iron. This is before I had gray hair and gray hair in my hair and gray hair in my beard, and I just shaved, so you can't see any of that, which is kind of nice. Since I'm talking to you, I'm self-conscious about it. So this machine came out when I was 35. I'm now 44, 45 in a couple of weeks. So that's how old this box is. It's a quarter of my life. So the end of service for Power8, and when I say Power8, I mean most of the models. Each one has a different end of service date, but the end of service was announced in November of 2022. And it pretty much is the entire product line of Power8. The only difference is the larger machines end of service date is in the fall of 2024. The other smaller machines are in the spring of 2024. And that's going to coincide with some maintenance increases that we're going to talk about here. So if for some reason you haven't heard that Power8 has gone end of service before this webinar, here is the link. You can get a download for this after the presentation, and that will allow you to look at the details of everything here. Plus, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But for the most part, I would argue that the springtime is where we're going to really see a lot of these machines turned over. So the 41As and the 42As, that's the big, SMB, medium-sized business type of model machines, and that's a big deal, as you can see right here. So the 22A, the funny thing about the 22A was, it was a relatively popular machine. I know a lot of really, really small customers that went to the 22A, and for a system that size, it's going to go a little bit beforehand on March 31st. May 31st is the day of the 41A. That's the big one for me because it also coincides with the end of service, the hardware maintenance upgrade as well. So what's this mean for everything? So as I mentioned, operating systems, okay, that's what drives hardware upgrades. And it's kind of funny. I remember, and I've said this so many times over the years, I met chief architect of the AS420 some odd years ago, Frank Soltis, and he did a presentation for our user group here in Canada. And he had a funny story that the difference between P-Series and I-Series customers at the time were that when a new version of AIX comes out, P-Series customers go and upgrade it. When the new version of OS 400 gets released, customers upgrade to the release before that. So they tend to stay behind a little bit. Very conservative on their upgrade strategy. So oftentimes when you find a system goes end of service, a physical system, a hardware goes end of service, then customers are kind of then forced to make a decision. Okay, what are we going to do? We got to upgrade here, it's coming, and let's get something on the book so we can do it. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these Power8 machines here now. When we look at what operating systems are currently supported on your Power8 machine, you only have one option left. So if you're currently running 7.3, 7.2, 7.1 on your Power8, you will need a service extension for those releases. Actually, 7.1, I don't think is even offering a service extension anymore. But for 7.2 and 7.3, if you want to call IBM for support, you need a service extension, period. They will not talk to you, which is a good driver for getting up to 7.4 on this particular piece of kit. All right. The other thing is that 7.4 has been out for a few years now. 7.5 is what, a year? It's getting older. It's about a year and a bit. And you know, when we look at where we want to be, does it make sense to go right to 7.4 or go right to 7.5 if your hardware supports it? Most of the time when we're doing upgrades now, I would argue that 7.5 is the target release where we're bringing customers, because they're running Power 9 or Power 10. They don't want, and they're running 7.3, they don't want to go to 7.4. They want to go to 7.5 because it's one less upgrade they need to do. So yeah, we can skip an upgrade or skip a version and go straight to 7.5 from 7.3. That's not a problem. But just do know that your move to 7.4 on your Power8 is probably going to be a short-term move, I would argue. It would be in my shop, just because of, you know, my perspective on how I like to keep things relatively up to date. So we're going to talk about the service extensions for 7.3 and the news I got from Richie Palma this morning, my coworker. He would mention the 7.2 service extension, and yeah, in the spring it's going to be quite ghastly, as I mentioned. So anyways, from a release perspective, when we talk about short term on 7.4, if you go to 7.4, probably not the best move you can make, just based on how long these things are supported for. So yes, we are bound by non-disclosure agreements with IBM by way of the IBM Champion Program and through the Common America's Advisory Council, et cetera, our business partner agreement. We cannot disclose information that IBM does not want disclosed publicly. So I'm not doing any of that. What I'm doing here is showing you folks some straight math, or I'll let you guys do the straight math. When we look at how long an operating system release is out there for, 7.1 was out for 8 years, okay? 7.2 is out for 7 years. 7.3 is out for 7 and a bit. And the way that IBM has been doing release upgrades now, you know, they went, you know, 4 years longer, or sorry, a year longer than they really wanted to between operating system releases. So when you look at what IBM has been doing for the last couple of years, it's been a 3-year cadence. Okay, they did a 4-year. I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but 4 years between 7.1 and 7.2. IBM has said, you know, off the record, on the record, webinars, in person, that was too long, because it costs them money to support an operating system longer than they really should. So 4 years, you're not going to see that now. You saw 2 years between 7.2 and 7.3 because they wanted to get to more of a 3-year cadence. 7.2 was too short, okay, or 7.2 to 7.3 was too short. So they found their nice Goldilocks zone, okay. 3 years is what you're going to see for the foreseeable future, I would argue. But when you look at the end of marketing, end of service dates, you can kind of forecast, roughly speaking, when 7.4 is going to go into service. It feels like it was just announced, but do the math in your own head and you can tell, roughly speaking, how long you're going to have with 7.4. Does it make sense to go there yet? Go to 7.4? You can probably make an argument either way. This time next year, I would say it's a colossal waste of time, and to go to 7.5 you can't. But if you're on Power8 and you're running 7.3 now, your move to 7.4 should be good from a cost justification perspective, and we'll get there when we're talking about the service extension stuff, which we will right now. So 7.1, do a time check here, quarter after. So 7.1, their service extension, the second iteration of a service extension for 7.1 is going to end in the spring of 24. Okay, you're probably not going to see that extended a third time. With that being said, I doubt anybody is on this call running 7.1. If you are and you're paying for a service extension, good luck. I would think that you would use some of the options we're going to talk about later on about Power10, about cloud, things like that, in order to get someplace where it's not going to break your pocketbook. 7.2, this is a thing that I do know will be extended. Okay, so the initial first iteration of their service extension started in 2021. It's ending this spring. My buddy Richie Palma we were talking about it this morning, and he popped up a PDF. He said, yeah, here's the thing on 7.2 service extension, what it's going to be in the spring. So 7.2 service extension is going to be 3 times the cost of your software maintenance. So this is not just 3 times, this is a 300% increase of your current software maintenance. So let's just say, and I'll probably use a very similar analogy as we go through this. Let's say you're on a Power8 right now, or sorry, a P10 software tier on your Power8. So you've got a little extra memory, you got 128 gig of memory. That's going to push you into the 6-core unit. That's a P10 software tier, and you're running 7.2 paying for a service extension, probably not paying through the nose right now. In the spring, you will be paying your, say, roughly speaking, let's say you've got 2 cores. Okay, so give or take 16 grand a year for your software maintenance. Now, that's going to be 16 grand plus 300%. I didn't do the math, but I would argue that that's in the $50,000, $60,000 per year range. Crazy. So when I talk about a ghastly number, that's a huge increase. That 300% increase is massive. So I would argue you'll probably want to, if you're looking for tension for change rather, with your boss, tell them about a 300% increase to remain on 7.2 service extension. That's pretty rough. 7.3 was just announced, coinciding with the end of service announcement back in September. Now, they're doing things a little differently with 7.3, which kind of corresponds with what they do to 7.2. It's not as bad right away, but we're going to get into that a little bit. Let's talk about what you do get with a service extension. Okay, so you can get existing PTFs, you can get known defect support. Yes, if you have an issue, you can't guarantee that the PTFs IBM has available will fix your issue. There's problems with that. Okay, so look for a great example of 7.1. The last time we had a hyper group for 7.1 was in 2022. There's still a service extension for 7.1 out there lasting until the spring. But when you look at it, the last security group PTF was security was back in March 8th, 2022. They put out 2 fixes. Now, in the last little while, you've had some, I would call them critical security vulnerabilities, where there was one that was highly publicized in IT Jungle, where you can send fuzzy credentials to the DRDA server. I can't remember what one it was, but it would allow you to actually submit commands without even authenticating to the system. That's pretty huge. Now, your command authority is going to determine whether that command actually runs or not, but that's still a pretty big thing. There's been a couple of ones that we put out some alerts for just in the last, I don't know, month, 6 weeks, give or take. People on 7.1 are not getting those. People on 7.2, yes, you can download those PTFs, absolutely. But yeah, if you're still running on 7.1, you're not getting any of those fixes. IBM has not commented publicly on those operating systems, but logic would dictate if they're bringing it back from 7.5 all the way to 7.2 for some of these critical fixes, 7.1, 6.1, so on in the past are likely vulnerable to those. They're just not going to fix them because they're not putting any effort into those operating systems. Big deal. So, historically speaking, from a software maintenance perspective, you would always look at 100% of your software maintenance. So if you've got a P05, little tiny Power8 machine, okay, yeah, little 64 gig and under machine. Your software maintenance, 2,600 per year. This is rough pricing, and I'm Canadian, so I have to kind of go between US and Canadian prices constantly. So give or take 2,600 bucks. If you were to get a service extension, well, you're doubling that. Okay, so you're adding additional 100%, which brings you to 5,200, twice as much you used to pay. Same thing with the P10 tier, $8,000 for one license, one core activated of IBMI. So your service extension is going to be another 8,000 for a total of 16,000. That was bad. That was expensive. Let's talk a little bit about hardware. Okay, every year, in terms of service extensions, let's say you have a power systems machine that went end of service. IBM would usually keep that going for a while, and you would look at your hardware maintenance costs as a modest increase, not much at all, maybe 4, 5, 6 points, if that. It's rumored that it was higher, but in reality, when you get a quote for it, it was never too bad. So it's very consumable to keep older hardware around, as long as, you know, your operating system is not costing you a fortune. The hardware is going to run, it's going to run. That's great. Problem is that something does break. iView hardware, IBM end of service hardware, when you have that on a service extension, as a glorified time and materials contract, because really that's what it is. When they have the time, and if they have the parts, when they have the parts, they'll come and help you. Your contract for a service extension on expired hardware, if you haven't read it, you should. You know, your whatever it is, 3-4 hour window to have problem resolution, or at least, you know, a customer engineer on site with parts to fix your issue, that doesn't apply anymore. So if they have to fly in, okay, I'm in Nova Scotia, let's just say I need to get a part, and that part is not local to me, and they have to ship it in. Well, where's it coming from? Well, it's coming from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, and they have to ship it over the border by truck, and then they're going to put it on a plane in Toronto. Then they're going to send it to Halifax. Then my local CE is going to pick it up there. I could be 2 days getting a RAID controller. And I use that example because that's something that did happen to me when I had a valid maintenance contract on a Power8 8 years ago. So imagine that when I don't have a valid contract. Would it be 3 days, 4 days? Who knows? That's a problem. So you really need to look at the terms and conditions of what you're paying for. Yeah, you're not really paying too much in the past for your hardware maintenance extension, but the value you're getting is far less. Same thing with your software maintenance. So this is some of the end of service limitations that IBM does talk about. We'll go into this a little bit more in detail, but when you look at the amount of physical parts IBM has from a hardware perspective, you know, they're not making Power7, Power8 RAID controllers anymore. They're just not. They're not making disk drives. They're not even making new disk drives for Power10 units, because the NVMe option is much more, much less expensive rather, and 3, 4, 5 times powerful than SSDs. So why the heck would I put an SSD or a spinning drive in? Even if I could buy a spinning drive for a Power10, I wouldn't. And then, by the way, back on the Power9 41Gs, I do a lot of public bidding up here, and I would beat other partners, you know, 6 days a week and twice on Sunday on machine configs, because I would put the new NVMe adapters in on the 41G config and say, look, you're looking for spinning drives or SSDs, I'm going to blow you out of the water on price and performance by putting NVMe adapters in there. So it makes no sense even at Power9 to be putting in spinning drives. It just doesn't. Anyway, I digress. But when we're looking at this stuff, they're not making new, I don't know, motherboards, you know, backplanes, what have you. They're just not doing them. So there's a finite supply. It may come down to it that you may be looking for a part on eBay, or calling up, one of our third-party maintenance guys, say, hey, look, what do you got for RAID controllers or disk drives on my Power8 or Power7? And our guys will come running with those things. So just be aware of what you're actually going to be buying. Now, in terms of what we're looking at now with 7.3 service extension, and this applies to 7.2 and 7.1 and so on. So can I call IBM for help? No, not without a service extension, not without paying twice as much. And at 7.3, it's not twice as much. It's more higher than that. We'll get to that in a second. Can I report a software defect? No, can't do that either. Can I request a fix for a known defect? No, sorry, can't do that either. Can I download new PTFs? Sure, why not? We're making PTFs, you can pull them down. We're just not going to help you with something that you need PTF'd. That's a key differentiator in the service level that you're going to get. Can I get 7.4, 7.5? Yes. The service extension is not applicable to ordering 7.4 or 7.5 keys for your machine. And that's a very good thing. So, can you tempt fate? Can you walk without a net across a high wire until you can get to a piece of new iron that you want to bring in with 7.5 preloaded and do a mixed mode migration or something like that? Yes, you can. And you can get your keys for 7.5. However, will you get any support from IBM for your upgrade? Not without the service extension. So sorry. So if you're running 7.3 with no service extension and you're on, I don't know, TR2, technology release 2 of 7.3, and you want to go to 7.4 and you want to put PTFs on to prep for going to 7.4, and you blow out the link loader or something like that, I don't think that problem really exists at a certain TR level at 7.3. But let's just say you do have a critical problem in getting the system ready for the upgrade. IBM will not help you. They will say, what's your credit card number? Because we're going to ding you for the service extension just to get you the ability to get on a phone call with a customer engineer. That's when customers usually call us, and we can help them out, complete the upgrade, and then their normal support contract kicks in. Here's where it gets expensive. So assuming 7.3 on a Power8, I had to move that little thing out of the way here so I can see the rest of the screen. So what we're going to be doing now, remember I said that 7.2 service extension starts at a 300% increase of your base software maintenance. That's because they've already done year 1, 2, and 3 of 7.2 service extension. The first iteration of service extension for 7.2 will be done. So they're moving straight to 300%. For 7.3, you're coming out of the gate with, instead of 100%, it's 150%, your base SWAMA. And year 2 is 200%, year 3 is 250%, and then assuming there is a second iteration of 7.3 service extension in 2027, or 2026 rather, then yeah, you could probably imagine, take the leap of logic and say, I would assume year 4 is going to cost me 300% of my base SWAMA. In the spring, there's also going to be a 70% increase on hardware maintenance. Now, as early as February of 2023, IBM was going back and forth. This is actually better than what they were going to do, much better. They were actually talking about tripling your hardware maintenance cost. They decided against that. They actually put out a business partner memorandum. They weren't going to put anything public out there. They wanted partners to spread the word that they're going to do something. And what they're thinking is right now, we're going to triple your hardware maintenance cost to remain on a Power8. They decided not to go with that. They probably got some really tough feedback. They settled on a 70% price increase for your hardware maintenance. We're going to math this out in a second. That's a huge, huge increase for hardware. Now, remember what I said a couple of slides before, that you're going to be paying, usually a little bit more for a lot less. You're going to be paying 70% more for that same a lot less. It doesn't sound like a great deal. So let's break down the math. Let's say we've got an 814 machine running 7.3 right now. V10 software here, 2 IBM I cores in use, and let's just say their maintenance expires October 31st, or it just expired there a couple of weeks ago. So what do they got to do? Well, Yearly hardware maintenance is currently, roughly speaking, 11,000 bucks. SWAMA is 16 grand, so 8 grand per core. What this guy had to do? Well, we need, let's just say we want to have that Power8 covered because we want to put a Power10 in there, or we want to get to the cloud, or we want to do something. So we have to buy some additional months. We don't want to buy a year's worth. So let's buy maintenance up until May 31st. Okay, so we don't get dinged with that 70% increase. And it'll also give us 5-6 months of runway where we can get something new in there, installed, migrated, everybody is happy. That's great. As for June 1, let's just say they don't want to do that. Let's say they want to stay on Power8. Well, okay, on June 1st, they renew 6 months at a time. So they're 11,412. Add 70% divided by 2 for 6 months, then they're paying 9,700 bucks every 2 months, or sorry, every 6 months in order to just maintain their hardware. Either way, you're looking at 19,400 every year to maintain just the hardware. That's a hefty increase from 11,000. You're going to 19,000, so an $8,000 increase every year. From a software perspective, okay, what are we looking at? Well, let's look at what their options are. They're running a Power8, so they can go to 7.4. Our 7.4 upgrades are not that expensive. Other people's, do the Pepsi challenge. I don't care. We do it better. But when you do an upgrade, you won't have to pay for a service extension. You just have the heavy hardware maintenance you got to deal with. And okay, fair enough. Let's just say you want to keep the Power8 around longer than you really want to. You can certainly do that. But in order to offset the cost of the service extension, upgrade to 7.4. However, if you say, well, I can't upgrade. I was talking to a customer yesterday that was like, we really want to upgrade in December, but the boss says we can't. We have to wait until maybe second quarter of 2024, maybe third quarter, and we'll get around to upgrading our 6 partitions. Okay, that's fair enough. You can put your service extension in place now, and it's going to be not pretty. But that's the price you have to pay to remain on an unsupported operating system. So for this customer, if they elect to stay on 7.3, year 1 is going to cost them 16 grand for their base SWAMA plus 650%, which is $40,000. Year 2, that'll go to 48,000. Year 3, that goes to 56,000. Year 4, so on and so forth. You get your 300% increase. Yeah, that's hefty. So if you look at the cost, 3 years of software maintenance for a supported operating system, you're paying 48 grand for 2 cores. Not bad. It's a heavy piece of iron. You probably have a fairly hefty workload, and that's what your software maintenance is going to cost. However, if you elect to run on an unsupported operating system and you want to put service extension on it, it's going to cost you almost $100,000 more to not do anything and have less of an opportunity to take advantage of certain things like calling IBM for help. If you don't want to, you don't want to spend that money. If you do want to spend the money, yeah, you can call IBM for help. But still, it's $100,000 more to do nothing at all. That's pretty rough over 3 years. I would argue a $3,600 OS upgrade is much more money well spent. Okay. So when I look at prices like this, or cost penalties like this, I can cost justify a Power10 relatively quickly. And I have an ROI document that I usually plug some numbers in and say, look, if you stay where you're at, you're going to spend this. If you go to a Power10, upgrade cost included, new iron, it's going to be, you'll make your money back in 18 months or 2 years or 9 months or whatever the cost is. It's usually easy to cost justify something when you take the software maintenance service extension into consideration, not just the hardware. So what are the options we have? Well, they're still selling Power9s. If you wanted to get a 41G, you still can buy it. However, if you look at it, Power9 architecture, outside of the backplane and the NVMe options and things like that, it's a 6-year-old almost piece of technology. Do you really want to invest in that? I would argue that you probably want to keep your assets a little more current. Power10 is nearly well, call it a year and a half old. It's stable. um, it's out there, and as I mentioned before, the NVMe adapters, like if you let's just say, for instance, sake of argument, you spend $45,000 on spinning disk drives, or maybe 65,000 on an SSD for your Power8. Your cost of going into NVMe storage, or even external storage with a SAN, if you have a lot of terabytes, it will be less expensive than your overall Power8 cost. I would probably argue we see that a lot. Individual part numbers may go up in price, but I would think that the most of the time when I do a lot of these cost justifications, the Power10 is actually less of an investment that the Power8 was. So Power10 is stable. It will run 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, and probably IBM i next, which will, I would say probably, because they haven't announced that. They haven't announced that to me. I'm just assuming based on, when we look at machine lives and how they spread over different power iterations, I would argue that the next version of IBM i will probably run on Power10. Can't guarantee that I next plus one will, but I would argue that, the next iteration after 7.5, I'm not saying it, will likely run on a Power10. So you should be, I don't like the word future-proof, but you're more future-safe by going to a Power10 over a Power9 for sure. And if you look at straight horsepower, and we have a chart a couple of slides down, which I'll go to in a minute, but if you look at pure horsepower differences, let's just go over there real quick. Why not? Oh, this guy. Here we go. So if you look at the difference in terms of CPW, look at the S814, 9400 CPW per core, Power9. Oh shoot, the S1014 is up there. This guy right here is the equivalent. 26,000, whether it's a P5 or a P10, per core, you're looking at a drastic increase. I had a customer there yesterday actually said, hey, we had 3 cores on our Power8 and we went to a Power10 and you only brought over 2 cores. Why'd you sell us 2 cores? I'm like, well, if you look at what I'm doing here, we doubled your CPW with the Power10, going from 3 cores to 2. What's that going to do for you? Well, it's going to reduce your software maintenance cost, because the less cores you pay for, the less IBM i licenses you pay for, and the less SWAMA you're paying per year going forward. Why would I bring over an extra core when I don't need to? You're not even tickling the box to begin with. I would argue you probably can go down to 2 cores on the existing machine, but I digress. But you can see the difference in machines, that if you have a multi-core Power8 right now, and we're actually cost justifying a massive Power7 with something like 24 cores, big 770s, whatever they are, and bringing them down to half the physical cores on a Power10, that will take their software maintenance way down going forward, because they're paying for, I'm not even going to say the number, but it's huge SWAMA cost for them. And that number is going to drop drastically by reducing the core count, just because of the increased CPW. So when we're talking about the difference between Power8 and Power10, just from a horsepower perspective, it's huge. It's huge. So what's your other options here? Well, we do cloud. We've had i in the cloud for a long time, and I like cloud. I'm an on-premises guy. That's no secret about that. However, there are times where cloud does make great financial sense to an organization. Okay, you don't have to worry about the electricity and the management and the hardware and the maintenance and the this and that. It's all cloud. And from a cost justification perspective, if you have a very small workload, not a very small workload, but a small workload, let's say you have 1 core on a Power8 with, I don't know, 48 gig of RAM. That's a perfect cloud machine. It really is. You will save money going to cloud. If you have 4 cores active on a Power8, I don't know, P20 box, cloud is more in terms of cost. But every company's different, and they would probably want to spend a little bit more to get out of the hardware game, get out of the data center game, fair enough, whatever floats your boat. So if you're thinking about cloud, we can certainly facilitate that for you. As well, Service Express is a third-party maintenance provider. And if you want to maintain older iron or even newer iron, we have Power9s that are currently on third-party maintenance. We can certainly facilitate that by bringing in a TPM seller to work with you on a price. And it's pretty darn inexpensive, if I'm honest with you. Now, there are risks and benefits and things when you talk about doing that versus buying new iron or going to the cloud. Everybody's different. You have to look at your certain circumstances and say, do I want to go to TPM? Do I want to do cloud? Do I want a Power 10? Do I want to stay where I'm at and just pay the fee? It all depends. You have to write down the pros and cons of every option, the costs of every option, and then make an informed decision. And I suppose that's the whole goal of this webinar, is to try to give you a little bit more insight of what's coming down the pike. Moreover, I should mention that in January, there will be I can hear Lori LeBlanc ringing in my ears right now because she corrected me. I thought it was a 6% software maintenance increase coming January 1st or 2nd. And for some reason, I want to say it's higher than that because I think I was corrected a few weeks ago by Lori, but I didn't retain it. So Lori, if you're listening, just text me what the number is. Either way you look at it, it's at least a 6% software maintenance increase come January. So this being fourth quarter and us being an IBM business partner, if you want to go to Power 10, if you want to buy your software maintenance now and save yourself that price increase in January and the hardware maintenance price increase in April or May rather, then please reach out. I'd be happy to help you with that. But just be aware that there is when you talk about SWAMA, SWAMA is not cheap. So if you look at that $16,000 number, yeah, if let's just say you're running 7.4, for instance, on your Power 8, then your 16,000 will be 16,000 times 1.06, and that's what your SWAMA is going to be. It is more expensive. So if you're thinking about upgrading, now is the time to do it before January hits. As long as the order is into our distributor before the end of December, I would argue before Christmas week, just because everybody's taking vacations and people are busy, et cetera, then that's probably your best bet to make that, to head down that road. So that's all I really have to say about that. I want to check in on some of these questions, see if there's any questions here. Oh, there's a few. I'm always surprised when people have questions. First one. We have an 828641A with IBM prepaid hardware maintenance through May 2026. Should we expect IBM to issue a prorated credit for the unused portion of this maintenance contract? A prorated credit for the unused portion, I'm assuming you're going to go to a Power 10 and you're wanting to see if you get money back. I'm not too sure about that. I know that is what they do say it, but often I don't run into people with 3 years left on their hardware and software maintenance. So I'm not too sure about that answer. Often folks can't upgrade as the ERP or other mission critical app doesn't support the newer OS. What did they do then? Upgrading to 7.4, 7.5 will break the app. Kind of depends. It kind of depends. Let me tell you what I do. If I have a customer, and I've done this in the past with a customer or a couple of customers, there is a customer with a fairly popular EDI application, and that EDI application wasn't supported on 7.4. Customer wanted to get to 7.4 to facilitate a Power 9 migration, if I remember correctly. This is a couple of years ago. And yeah, this is like 2 years ago. Wow, it's been that long. Anyways, they told me what the problem was. And I was able to contact the software vendor and tell them that they're making a horrendous mistake by not supporting 7.4. And I managed to pummel them into submission where they're supporting 7.4 and are now considering supporting 7.5 as well. So I suppose it depends on who you're talking to, right? So if you want to move the elephant then you have to find somebody who can give you the wherewithal to do that, or has the wherewithal themselves to do that. So I had a couple of conversations with that particular ERP vendor, and it was productive. They listened. They were a willing dance partner, and they were willing to move. Because my justification was, well, you realize the massive differences between 7.3 or 7.4 is Java, right? As long as your app, which was, it did run some JVMs. So I said, if your app is going to run on 7.4, it's going to run on, I don't know, Java 8, because it currently runs on Java 7. And we tested their app on Java 8 on their test environment. So we swapped the JRE, pointed to Java 8. The damn thing ran just fine. So my comments to the software vendor was, this looks like it should run on 7.4 without issue. We ask you to reconsider kindly. And they did. And they now support that customer. So that customer could do their upgrade. Now, if it's a bigger elephant, well, we do have other tools in our arsenal. I've reached out to IBM leadership before, and I've gone hat in hand on behalf of customers saying, hey, can you speak to XYZ vendor? They're dragging their heels on supporting 7.4. They're dragging their heels on supporting 7.5. Give them a swift kick in the rear end, please, and thank you, because you have a better business relationship than I do with them, and you know how to pull their strings a little bit further than I could. So while I may not be able to move the elephant directly, we are good friends with people who can get a bigger elephant and push those guys. So I would argue, if you're in that position, shoot me a note directly, and I'll let you know what we can do to help you there. Lori LeBlanc says 10% increase on Swama. Thank you, Lori. Or sorry, 6 for software. Now you're unclear. She says 10, then 6 for software. So I think I'm right with software. Maybe it's 6 for software, 10 for software maintenance. That's probably where I got confused. And I think that's what Lori's saying. Awesome. I've been looking for an updated power comparison. You're welcome. And I've been advised that it's 10 for Swama, 6 for software. Perfect. Thank you, Lori. Appreciate that. Okay, that appears to be the end of the questions. I'll just check the chat here just in case there's anything in there. There is not. I don't know. We have some time here. Heather, I can hang out. You want to talk football?
Oh, do I? Jets are having one heck of a year. So we'll wait here for about 1 or 2 more minutes, see if anyone has any questions. If someone does have a question later on that they realized that they wanted to ask and they didn't, there's an opportunity to either send me an email. We'll make sure it gets over to Steve, or you can bring that question to our live Q&A that we're going to have next week. So we're going to be bringing back Pete and Steve, and we'll be doing a live Q&A covering all things Power 10. We're happy to still talk about Power 8. And let's see if we get 1 or 2 more questions in. But if not, I think this is a good place to let everyone get going.
Sure.
People are, I'm like thinking it's lunchtime. It's still a little early.
Every time
lunchtime for you.
Every hour is lunchtime for me. Come on.
That's true. First and second lunch over here.
That Q&A next week, that could be a 2-hour session. If we went through part 1, and at the end we're like, we have all these questions left over, and there's even I'm getting emails from people saying, hey, by the way, can you mention something here on this or that? So there is there's so much there. I would be surprised if we get through the whole thing in an hour.
We again, on the sign up sheet for this webinar as well, we are letting people submit questions in advance. So we are getting a lot of questions already submitted. So I'm really looking forward to next week. I think we've got a lot of information that's going to be coming out.
Fabulous.
So, all right, I guess we'll wrap this up. Thank you everybody for joining us. We appreciate that, whether you're joining us from the UK, here in the States. We're happy that you have you back on today's webinar. Just a reminder, again, the recording and slides will be available. Those will be coming out tomorrow. And again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Heather Dinho, hdinho@serviceexpress.com, and I can get any of your questions routed, or you can bring them to our session next week. So thanks everyone. We look forward to seeing you soon.